I'm Cara. I'm a product manager. What is CRM experimentation? Why is it important? Why are brands employing it right now? And then we'll dive into how we've applied that to a brand that we worked with, an athleisure brand, and what they ultimately did with these results. And first-party data is really one of the most valuable assets that brands have at their disposal today. Brands need to collect it, they need to activate it, and they need to work on it. 90% of their efforts are going to new customer acquisition, and maybe only 10% of their efforts are going towards retention. So what is it? How does it work? So it's a split test. Typically, it's an RCT, or random controlled experiment. So you have a house file, which is just a big fat file that you've collected over the years. So you've got their name, their address, their email address, their phone number, all of the PII associated with your customers. And then, of course, you have all of their actual purchase data, right? So their orders, their revenue, how many times they've purchased, all of that fun stuff. And then you can split that down into different segmentation. You can break those segments down into even further micro segments. And then you would split it into test and control groups, depending on what the test design is, right? And obviously your test group, you can split even further to give them different media treatment, right? And then of course there would be opt-in status that you would want to bring into your segmentation there, so you can make sure you can target all of those groups with email as well. And then a control group that sees nothing. You would send those each of those audiences their dedicated treatment, and then ultimately you would match back those audiences to the transaction data. So you could test on your entire file, you could test on only a segment of your file. It all depends on the test design. You would split those segments into test and control groups depending on what you want to learn. And then you'd have to make some assumptions to see if you're going to get a statistically significant read, right? You'd have to figure out what do I expect my incrementality to be? Like, what is your hypothesis going into this? I think that Facebook media gives a 20% lift on my customer file when I give them Facebook ads, right? That's your hypothesis, right? So you'd assume a 20% lift. So we would ultimately take these incrementalities and we would apply them. But let's say that you only took a sample of a customer file, right? A small sample, ran a test. You can take those incrementalities and then apply them to the larger file, and then understand what it will look like when you actually go to market with those incrementalities, because you're taking a representative sample of your file using segmentation parameters like RFM, like opt-in status, etc. So it'll just tell you whether or not, based on that test design, you're going to get a stat sig read. And then you can kind of mess around with it. Sig, can I change the makeup of my test and control groups in terms of how I'm splitting them? The 45, 45, 10, for example, could that actually, do I need to make my holdout bigger so that I have a larger group to respond and compare to? So that'll give me a stat. Let's get into the case studies. So again, we're working with a D2C athleisure brand. They wanted to identify the optimal contact strategy and increase their retention-based revenue. And we did this through using CRM experimentation and RFM analysis. So I'm going to take us through the setup of the brand brief and what they were trying to learn, the problem. 45% was going to get reach and frequency on Facebook. 45% was going to get conversion optimized on Facebook. A control group was going to get nothing. And so that was the test design. We used the Excel template, put some assumptions in there in terms of conversion rates and incrementalities, so we can make sure that we were going to see a stat sig read. Okay, so once we had an approved test design here, we created audience files for them. So we randomly put a group into the 45%. We put campaigns on top of them, one RNF, one conversion based, and then we ran the test. I think the test ran for 14 days. So here's the results at the top line. You've got your control group. Conversion targeted, we got a 1.11 conversion rate. RNF, we got a 0.96. Control group, we got 0.93. When you compare those to the control group, we zoomed into these results like we talked about, and we pulled out kind of which segments were working for each of the different targeting types, so we could come up with the optimal contact strategy, and that's what they could put into market.
Okay, so we took 19 days of data. Now, if you did revenue by reach, you get dollar per customer. So the brand was able to get $2.14 for the 63,000 users they had in 0 to 6 months. We did the same for 2023, and we grouped 0 to 12 months, 0 to 6 and 7 to 12, and call it as existing. and 12 to 24 plus months was classified as lapsed. We saw what was the overall performance of click targeting and reach frequency targeting, and then we looked at the opted in, opted out level. Now we are going to look at it a little bit more deeper, right? So here you have recency, frequency, and opt-in. This is all we had to work with. You could also have more dimensions. We were able to get a reach and conversion for every segment group that we had. This is the next stage, right? So here you would get 644 incremental orders if you pick only those segments, if you had only activated them. And then the baseline order, so if you divided this, then you would get a lift of 25%. Your order level lift would be 25% and your revenue level lift would be 35%, right? So this seems like a good approach going into BFCM, given the amount of time that we have to make these decisions and come up with a strategy. So if you did not change your strategy, if you are just doing whatever you are doing, then we are saying that you will get this many orders. Now, if we apply this 25% lift, right, so you get additional 1,000 conversions, and we estimate that your total number of conversions would be 4,900, but the revenue is still slightly lower, right? It has gone up from 138K to 187K, but last year BFCM, they did a revenue of 203K, right? So this is the assumption and this is the strategy that we came up with. We did pull out two different customer lists, right? So certain users were conversion optimized, certain ones were reach frequency. So we had to upload them as two different lists, and you had to set separate campaigns to target reach frequency and separate for